Hello and welcome back to Leafin'Green. I hope you guys are living a bit more green, and this video is certainly going to help you do just that. I haven't been able to find a lot online about how to buy a cutting, so hopefully this video will enable you to buy that plant that you have your eye on. I hope your plants are thriving and going happily, and if not, I hope you're on the road to finding out what's wrong. But here are some tips for that next plant that you're introducing to the fam. Now, this is just going to be brief. If you have any questions at all, feel free to get in touch. But the very first thing that you're going to want to do is get pictures of or look at the mother plant. You're going to want to find out whether the mother plant is a happy, healthy, thriving plant or whether she's a bit sickly looking, because the chances of your cutting surviving and actually rooting and growing into a plant are going to be so much higher from a healthy and thriving plant. It should not take long if you get a cutting from a healthy plant. So let's say you've seen the mother plant, you're super happy with her, check, tick, list item 1 is done. Now you got to decide what type of cutting you want. Now, best case scenario, the cutting is actually going to be chopped when you're going to the seller's place. So this is really good because you get a fresh cutting, you know what's happened to it since. This would always be my preference. If you do have that luxury and you have to decide whether you want a tip or a stem cutting, this is what that means. Here I have, so this is a philodendron splendid, and this is a tip cutting. So all that means is that this is the top of the plant that has been snipped. So it's still got its, I guess, growth point that it's going to grow from. And it's got a single leaf as well. So the next leaf will just develop and unfurl, and we haven't disrupted that at all. This will continue just growing up, which is really nice because it'll look neat. It'll be a lot quicker as well because it's still got that tip, that growth point there, which I'm very excited about. The other type is a stem cutting. So as it sounds, it is a portion of the stem. The top has been chopped off and there's just stem and one leaf. This cutting will take a bit longer and it'll use a bit more energy because it's going to need to find somewhere here to begin growing from, and it hasn't been yet. So I guess that is the benefit of a tip cutting, that the next leaf will just grow from there. This one, it'll need to work out where it's going to grow that from. While I'm holding this up, it doesn't actually have to be that big. I would often only go for a cutting of 1 or 2 nodes. Couldn't tell you what I was thinking this day, but it has rooted from the bottom node, so, you know, there you go. Now you want to think about how many nodes you want. So I always, usually go for 2 nodes if I can afford it, because if for some reason one node doesn't root, you've still got another node for that plant to grow from. I find it just safer. Then again, if it's come from a healthy plant, 1 node should be absolutely fine. So this is a single node plant that's actually already starting to root. I bought that unrooted. It was cut fresh when I was there. And that's a single node plant, and it's cutting, and it is loving life. This one, again, don't know what I was thinking, making a cutting with that many nodes, but yeah, look, only 1 node's rooted anyway. So yeah, that's just me. I would go 1 or 2 nodes. And you don't want to go too crazy with the leaves because a cutting can't actually support a whole bunch of leaves. So it depends on the size of cutting and the type of plant, but I would say 3 leaves max for a cutting. It's just not going to be able to support it. So where does that take us? We've decided, we've looked at the mother plant, we've decided on type of cutting, we've decided how many nodes and leaves we're going to have. The next thing will be to look at the actual health of the cutting that's either made or going to be made. So this, like amount of brown on the aerial roots and things is not going to be a huge factor because these aerial roots were completely brown, but the stem itself was healthy. So you could see that it was healthy. One, because it was freshly cut from a really healthy mother plant that was growing happily, but the stem was firm, no blemishes to the stem. It was a good cutting. Now, obviously the ideal situation would be, let me try to focus this here. If you can get a nice light colored fleshy aerial root on your cutting. So, and those ones there. In my experience, they usually do very well and root very quickly. But again, it doesn't really matter what it looks like if it is a healthy node and stem. Now let me show you a big mistake I made with the cutting and what you absolutely don't want to do. This. Let me see if I can focus that. See how, granted it was not that bad when I bought it, and I've had this for a while now because I just can't believe I bought such a beautiful tie and it's not a viable cutting, and I'm a little bit mad at myself, I'm not gonna lie. And I'm keeping it in water just in case it's gonna do something, but I mean, look at this, that is not gonna do anything. So what you don't want to see is some warping of the actual stem, which you can't see very well here, but the stem has a bit of wrinkling through it, which is like really odd. It should be a firm stem. The nodes and the aerial roots have rotted away, and that's brown and a little bit mushy. And we can also tell from, that's not that mushy, but it's brown, and you know, it just looks a little bit wilted. The nodes have rotted away. This is not a viable cutting and not something you want to go for. You definitely want to, aerial roots aren't necessarily from a node for a plant to grow, but if there's just no aerial root like this, and same with this one here, you might want to ask some questions and find out why. And in all likelihood, these had probably rotted away. The other thing is that the new leaf, so this was a tip cutting and this was a growth point, that new leaf has completely rotted away and the leaves were wilting. So they are signs of an unhealthy cutting. Like 2 out of 3 leaves were completely shriveled up, and sometimes it's because the plant can't support that size of leaf or that many leaves, but combined with how this looks. And this is obviously an extreme example because I've just left it in water, but any sign of rot like that, any wrinkling on the stem, any lack of firmness, anything gone wrong with the growth point, they're all warning signs. We want healthy plant, nice looking stem. Another thing is, if you're not getting it freshly cut when you're buying it, it's a really good idea to ask when it was cut and the conditions that it was stored in, because after some more digging, I found that this was actually left to callus over for 2 weeks, which is insane. I would never leave a cutting just cut and sitting around in Queensland heat for that long. I usually callus my cuttings for 24 hours here in Queensland. So that just basically seals off the, I guess, injury point on the plant. If you don't let that seal off, there's a higher risk of rotting if you're going to propagate in water or even soil. So especially for a thick cutting, you'd want to let it callus over for a little bit and heal and seal off before you actually start to propagate it. But you still want it to be a fresh cutting, and I don't know, I could be wrong, but I would never leave a live cutting for 2 weeks. So I callus mine for 24 hours. So work out how old it is as well, because that could be a key factor in how your cutting goes. And I think that basically covers it. The mother plant, the type of cutting, the nodes and the leaves, and how healthy they actually are. But I do have one top tip for you in terms of variegation. So if you're buying a plant for variegation, you're going to want to look at the genes on the mother plant and how variegated that is, and the genes on the actual cutting, because that's going to be a good indicator of the level and type and amount of variegation it's going to keep throwing out. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that it's got variegation. Depends on what type of plant, of course, but more often than not that it's got nice variegation down the stem. So if that was a fully green stem and this was producing, like, say, the next leaf looked pretty green, I'd be concerned. Definitely want to see that variegation down the stem and in the foliage. And if you're buying a whole plant, I guess, or even a cutting, the other thing you want to look at is what are the most recent leaves looking like? Is the plant reverting? Is the most recent leaf green? Has the stripe of variegation on the stem disappeared in the newest growth? Has it put out green leaf after green leaf, sort of thing? Because variegated plants, the majority of them, can actually revert back to fully green, and the newest leaves and foliage and the newest part of the plant will be a good indicator for how it's going and how variegated it's going to stay. But I think that's all from me, and I hope that gives you a little bit more confidence to shop for your next plant. And I'd be keen to hear from you if you have any questions or there's anything you'd like me to clarify from this video. Anyway, hopefully some of you like it. Hopefully some of you actually watch it. Hope it helps, and yeah, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of this type of thing. Until next time, bye guys.